The sun hammered down on Copper Gulch like the fist of an angry god, turning the dirt street into a skillet that baked boot soles and blistered exposed skin. Heat shimmered off false front buildings, distorting their outlines until the whole town looked like something melting, something that might disappear if you blinked hard enough. Ava Brandt knelt in that furnace, hands tied behind her back with rope that had already rubbed her wrists raw and bleeding. 19 years old, thin as a whip from months of deliberate starvation, dressed in a flour sack dress that hung off her frame like a shroud. Her father's eyes stared out of her face. Johann Brunt's clear gray eyes that had once looked at this same town with hope instead of the hollow despair that lived in them now. Blood trickled from her split lip, where Lucinda had struck her 20 minutes ago. The metallic taste mixed with dust and fear coating her tongue until she wanted to spit but couldn't spare the moisture. Her left shoulder throbbed where the burn scar, 2 months old, shaped like the bottom of a hot iron, pulled tight every time she moved. A reminder of what happened when she tried to run the first time. Lucinda Brandt stood over her like a carrying bird, admiring its meal, one hand gripping Eva's hair hard enough to make her scalp bleed where fingernails dug in. The woman who had married Eva's father 3 years ago and buried him 8 months later wore black silk that cost more than most miners made in a year. Silk bought with money that should have been Ava's inheritance. Money from the Ice Creek claimed that Johann Brandt had died defending. "This one's trouble," Lucinda announced to the small crowd gathering in the afternoon heat, her voice carrying that smooth Kentucky drawl she used when she wanted something. "Lazy, disobedient, owes me $400 in back debt for room and board since her daddy died and left us both destitute. I've been more than patient, but a woman alone can't afford charity. Lies, every word dripping with them like honey poisoned with arsenic." Ava had seen the land transfer documents the night before. Lucinda caught her, seen her father's signature forged in handwriting that didn't match. Seen the witness marks from Cornelius Quentin himself, the man who owned half of Copper Gulch and wanted to own the rest, the man who had threatened her father in writing 2 weeks before the accident that killed him. Sell Ice Creek or accidents happen. Brandt mining is dangerous work. Eva had found that letter hidden in her father's Bible the day after his funeral, pressed between Psalms and Proverbs like a curse made paper. She'd been too shocked to understand, then too broken by grief to connect the words to the cave-in that had crushed him. But she understood now. Klaus Brenner circled her like a buyer, examining livestock, his pale eyes calculating value the way other men calculated poker odds. He was a problem solver, a dealer in difficult merchandise. The kind of man who made girls disappear from Kansas City and reappear in San Francisco brothel with no memory of the journey between. He wore a suit despite the heat, immaculate despite the dust. And he smelled of bay rum and it's something else underneath it. Something chemical and wrong that made Eva's stomach turn. Spirited. He said the word clinical, emotionless. I can see the fire in her. Some men pay extra for that. They like breaking it. He reached out and grabbed Eva's chin, forcing her head up his fingers cold despite the heat. Others want them already broken. Depends on the market I'm selling to. Eva jerked her head away, earning a vicious yank on her hair from Lucinda that brought tears to her eyes. "See?" Lucinda's voice went shrill, calculated. "Disrespectful, ungrateful. After everything I've done for her, feeding her housing, her treating her like my own daughter, when I could have thrown her out after Yan died and left me with nothing but debts and a worthless claim." More lies. Ice Creek wasn't worthless. It had water year-round, the only reliable source for 20 miles. Water that Cornelius Quentin needed for his expanding copper operation. Water worth killing for if you were the kind of man who measured human life and profit margins. A small crowd had gathered, miners, fresh off shift prostitutes, taking afternoon breaks, shopkeepers drawn by spectacle. Marshal Godfrey stood in the shade, arms crossed, face carefully neutral. He wore a badge, but everyone knew who really owned him. Cornelius Quentin. $40, Klaus said. Finally, the words flat as cards dealt face down. That's my offer. Girl, this thin won't last long, and hard labor, and her spirit's going to cost me time to manage. $40 cash, or I walk. Lucinda's face went tight with calculation, greed, wearing with the desire to squeeze every penny. Ava could see the arithmetic happening behind those cold blue eyes. See the moment when bird in hand 1/2 in bush. $40 and you take her today, Lucinda countered. I want her gone before sunset, and I want it witnessed legal. Klaus nodded once, pulling a leather purse from his vest. Gold coins, $10 eagles, 4 of them, clinked into Lucinda's palm with sounds like destiny sealing itself. Ava watched her stepmother's fingers close around them, watched the last connection to her father's memory sold for the price of a decent horse. This was happening. This was real. In 5 minutes, she'd be property merchandise, a problem girl being shipped somewhere no one would ever find her. Then hoof beatats, a single rider coming fast from the north road horse, and man moving like they were one creature. The horse was a beagling 17 hands, easy with a white blaze and intelligent eyes. The man was Lakota, or had been before the world changed and made such things complicated. He wore buckskin pants and a cotton shirt sun-faded to cream, long black hair tied back with leather, a face carved from copper, and shadows ageless, could be 30 or 50, impossible to tell. A rifle in a saddle scabbard and a knife at his belt, both worn with the casual ease of tools used often. Akacheta Ava knew him by reputation, only the Lakota scout who'd worked for the army, until something happened that no one talked about, who now rode between camps and settler towns, belonging fully to neither, trusted by few, feared by many. He reigned in Tenafos from where Ava knelt his horse, throwing up dust that hung in still air. For a long moment, he just looked not at Klaus or Lucinda or the marshal, but at Eva herself, at the blood on her face and the rope on her wrists, and the resignation in her eyes that came from understanding exactly what was about to happen. Something flickered across his face, recognition maybe, or memory. His jaw tightened. That girl, he said, his voice carrying despite being quiet, each word precisely shaped. Don't touch her. Klaus's hand had been reaching for Eva's arm. It froze. This is a private transaction. Nothing to do with you, Scout. Everything to do with me, if I make it so, Akacheta replied. He swung down from his horse in one fluid motion. How much debt? $400, Lucinda said immediately, sensing opportunity. $40, Klaus interrupted, voice sharp. We already negotiated. The transaction is complete. Akacheta looked at the coins in Lucinda's palm, then at Ava, then at Klaus with something like contempt. $40, he said, each word deliberate as a knife thrust. You value a human life at $40. I value problem merchandise at market rate. Klaus shot back. I am bidding. Akacheta reached into his vest and pulled out a leather pouch that clinked it. $40 in gold. I buy the debt. The girl goes with me. The street went quiet except for wind and distant machinery. Lucinda's eyes went bright with greed. The debt is 400. The debt is 40, because that's what you just accepted from him, Akacheta interrupted. You don't get to change the price. $40. I pay it now. The girl goes free of debt. Free? Lucinda's voice went shrill. She owes you nothing, Akacheta said, voice going hard as flint. Her father died and you stole his claim. You forged his name. You sold his daughter. These are not the actions of someone owed. These are the actions of a thief. Lucinda's face went white, then red. How dare you? I dare because I see. Akacha turned to Klaus. You want to fight me for her? We can do that. Or you can take your $40 back and ride away while you still have a reputation intact. Because if I start talking about what you do and where girls go when you buy them, you'll find every town between here and Denver suddenly very interested in your business. Klaus's pale eyes went colder, calculating odds that suddenly didn't favor him. A public confrontation meant questions. Questions meant attention. Attention meant authorities who weren't on Quentin's payroll might start investigating. Keep your money, he said to Lucinda, voice flat and poisonous. And you, he looked at Akasheta with pure malice. Watch your back, Scout. Copper Gulch is a dangerous place. Accidents happen. They do, Akacheta agreed, especially to men who trade in human misery. Klaus mounted and rode away without looking back. But Ava saw the set of his shoulders and knew this wasn't over. Akacheta turned to Lucinda, who still held Klaus's gold. The money goes back, then I pay you. Legal witnessed. Lucinda wanted to argue, but too many people were watching. She threw the coins at Klaus's retreating back with impotent fury, then turned to snatch Acheta's gold with both hands. Witnessed, Marshal Godfrey said from the shade. Debt paid in full. Akacheta knelt beside Ava and cut her bonds with his knife. The blade sharp enough she barely felt it slice through rope. Blood rushed back into her hands with painful intensity. She gasped and nearly fell. He caught her arm, steadying her. Can you stand? She nodded, not trusting her voice, and forced herself upright through sheer will. Listen clear, Akacheta said, quietly pitched for her ears only. I bought the debt, not you. You understand? A debt paid is a debt erased. You owe me nothing. You're free to walk away right now if that's what you want. Ava stared at him, trying to understand why. Why? Because I watched my sister sold like livestock when I was 12 years old. He said, voice flat, but with something underneath, old pain worn, smooth, but never disappearing. Because I couldn't stop it then, and I can stop it now. Because some debts are worth paying even when you don't have to. He handed her his canteen. There's a doctor 2 streets over, Jeremiah Bertram. Good man. He'll look at those burns, clean your wounds. After that you choose. Stay or leave. Find work or find revenge. Whatever you need, but make it your choice. Dr. Bertram, she repeated. 2 streets over. Blue door. Tell him Akacheta sent you. Tell him you need care before sunset because that woman will find a way to cause trouble once shock wears off. He walked back to his horse. Mounted, looked down at her one last time. My people have a saying. The wolf that walks alone is either very brave or very foolish. Right now, you're alone. Don't be foolish. Accept help when it's offered clean. Then he rode away, heading north toward the Lakota camps, leaving Eva standing in Copper Gulch's main street, with bloody wrists, a split lip, and the first real choice she'd had in 8 months. Behind her, Lucinda's voice went shrill. You'll regret this, girl. You'll come crawling back within a week. Ava didn't hear the rest. She was already walking toward the blue door, 2 streets over, toward whatever came next. Toward the beginning of understanding that her father's death hadn't been an accident at all. Dr. Jeremiah Bertram's clinic smelled of carbolic acid and old blood. The front room served as both waiting area and examination space. A worn leather table patched with stitched repair shelves, crammed with bottles whose labels were written in cramped handwriting, and a window facing west, so afternoon light fell across the workspace in thick golden bands. Jeremiah himself was 60. If he was a day with steel-gray hair and hands that trembled slightly from what Eva suspected was whiskey more than age. But those hands were gentle as they cleaned her wrists, washing away blood and dirt with warm water that stung like hornets. Akacheta sent you, he said, Not a question. That man has a talent for finding trouble that needs fixing. He studied her split lip, the burned scar, the careful stillness of someone who'd learned any movement might bring punishment. How long has she been starving you? 5 months, Ava said, voice rusty. Since spring, when I started asking questions about my father's claim, Jeremiah's jaw tightened. He reached for salve, began working it into her wrists. Your father was Johann Brandt, Ice Creek claim. I remember him. Good man. The cave-in that killed him. He paused. There were things about it that didn't sit right. Ava's breath caught. What things? Things I couldn't prove. Things I didn't have the courage to investigate when investigating might have made me inconvenient to powerful men. Shame flickered across his face. The support timbers in that section were inspected 3 days before the collapse. The inspector said those timbers were solid oak, properly braced. Said that shaft was the safest in the whole mine. But it collapsed anyway, Eva whispered. It collapsed anyway. And your father was the only man in that section. And 3 days later, your stepmother had married him with witnesses, including Cornelius Quentin. And 2 weeks after burial, the Ice Creek claim transferred to Quentin's company for debt satisfaction. Neat, clean, legal. He finished bandaging her wrists. I'm telling you this because you have a right to know, but I'm also telling you to be careful because knowledge is dangerous in Copper Gulch. Ava looked at her bandaged wrists, at the burn scar visible through her torn sleeve. I'm already hurt. What more can they do? Oh, child, Jeremiah said softly. So much more. You have no idea how creative cruel men can be. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes focusing on something behind her. Eva turned to follow his gaze and saw what he'd seen. Her dress was torn where Lucinda had grabbed her. And through the tear, something white showed paper tucked into the lining where she'd sewn it 2 days ago. What is that? Jeremiah asked quietly. Eva reached back and pulled it free. A single page, carefully folded, worn soft from being carried. She'd found it hidden in Lucinda's Bible. She unfolded it and spread it on the examination table. Both of them leaned over it in the afternoon light. It was a ledger page, columns and rows, names and dates. But 3 entries made terrible sense. Johann Brandt, Ice Creek, Protocol 7 initiated, 21-28-D52, completed 312-D52. Water rights transferred 31-15-252. Thomas Morrison, Blue Ridge, Protocol 7 initiated, 11-02-51, completed 11-15-51. Mining rights transferred 11-18-51. Robert Sullivan, Dry Canyon Protocol 7 initiated, 84-51, completed 8-2051. Grazing rights transferred 8-22-51, and written at the bottom, in different handwriting. Lucinda's Brandt asset liquidation. Age 19 Protocol, 7 alternative. Brenner contacted, 7 Naui, 15-52. Protocol, 7, Jeremiah. Breathed, face going pale. Dear God, it's not just your father, it's systematic. What is Protocol 7A? Asked, though. Part of her already knew I don't. No, but I can guess. Your father died March 12th. Water rights transferred March 15th, 3 days later. Morrison died November 15th. Rights transferred 3 days later. Sullivan, the same pattern. He looked at her with dawning horror. They're not accidents. None of them were accidents. Protocol 7 is the door banged open. Klaus Brenner stood framed in afternoon light, no longer alone. 3 men behind him, all carrying rifles, and behind them, Marshal Godfrey, hand resting on his pistol, expression carefully neutral. The girl stole property, Klaus said, voice flat and cold. Property belonging to her legal guardian. We're here to retrieve it. She stole nothing, Jeremiah said, but his voice wavered. She's a free woman. Debt was paid. Debt was paid under false pretenses, Godfrey said. Mrs. Brandt has filed a complaint alleging theft. Until that's resolved, the girl needs to come with us. Ava's hand shot out and grabbed the ledger page, crumpling it against her chest. This paper proves my father was murdered. It proves Lucinda helped. It proves there's a pattern. It proves nothing except theft. Klaus interrupted. And if you resist, things will get unpleasant. For you, for the doctor. One of the hired men raised his rifle barrel, pointing casually at Jeremiah's chest. Jeremiah met Ava's eyes. She saw the decision forming the same decision he'd made when her father died, when Morrison died, when Sullivan died. The decision to look away, to survive. But this time, something was different. This time he'd already spoken truth out loud. "Run," he said quietly. "What? Run!" Jeremiah threw himself at Klaus's old body, moving with desperate speed, crashing into the bigger man. "Out the back! Go now!" Eva went. She snatched the ledger page, stuffed it into her dress, and bolted for the back door. Behind her, she heard shouting the meaty sound of fists hitting flesh. Jeremiah's voice raised. "You want to kill me? Kill me. But you'll have to explain to the whole town why." The back door led to a narrow alley. Ava's bare feet slapped against dirt as she ran her dress, tangling her breath, coming in gasps. Behind her footsteps, shouting a rifle shot that cracked the air and sent splinters flying from the wall beside her head. She dodged left then right, using every trick she'd learned through gaps between buildings over a fence that tore her dress across the back lot of the smithy, where hot coals spilled light. She burst out onto the north road, and there, like a miracle, was Akacheta. He'd stopped his horse 50 yards from town, checking the animal's hooves. But when Eva erupted from between buildings with blood on her feet and terror on her face and gunmen seconds behind her, he reacted instantly. "Up!" he barked, reaching down. Eva grabbed his hand, and he hauled her up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist just as Klaus and his men burst from the alley, rifles raised. "Stop!" Klaus shouted. "That girl is wanted for theft." Akacheta didn't answer with words. He kicked his horse into a gallop, and the bay leaped forward. The horse was trained for this, for sudden starts, for carrying double weight, for running like the devil was behind them, which Eva thought, as rifles cracked and bullets whined past. Maybe he was. They rode north into the badlands, into the maze of canyons and dry washes that only someone who knew this country could navigate. Behind them, pursued Klaus wouldn't give up easily. But Akacheta knew this land. He rode like he and the horse were one creature taking turns, without slowing jumping obstacles that appeared suddenly in the failing light. The sun set behind them, painting the sky orange and purple. Darkness fell fast in the desert temperature, dropping 20 degrees in as many minutes. Eva shivered in her thin dress arms locked around Akacheta's waist, the ledger page pressed between them like evidence of original sin. When full dark came and they'd put miles between themselves and Copper Gulch, Akacheta finally slowed the horse, letting it breathe. "Are they following?" Eva asked voice hoarse. "Yes," Cochetta said simply. "Klaus won't stop. Not after you embarrassed him. Not after you stole something important enough to chase into Badlands at night. Whatever that paper is, it's worth killing for." "It's proof," Ava said. "Proof my father was murdered. Proof it's systematic. Proof there's something called Protocol 7. "Tell me later," Akacheta interrupted. "Right now we need shelter before they catch up. There's a place 3 amiao north, a hollow with rock walls and one entrance. We can defend it if we have to." He kicked the horse into a trot, maintaining distance. Ava held on and prayed to something, to justice, maybe to whatever force decided some people lived and others didn't. Behind them, in darkness, torches bloomed like fireflies, men spreading out in a search pattern. Klaus had brought an army, and Ava had brought nothing but a piece of paper and a stranger's mercy. The hollow was a narrow CLFT in a sandstone ridge, invisible until you were right on top of it, the kind of place you only found if you knew it existed. The entrance was barely wide enough for the horse, the walls rising 20 feet to form a natural corridor that opened into a small circular space, maybe 30 yards across. Water seeped from a crack in the rock face, forming a small pool that was probably alkaline, but drinkable. Sage and juniper clung to life in scattered patches. The ground was sand and broken stone, holding no tracks. Akacheta dismounted and helped Eva down her legs, nearly buckling. She'd been running on terror and desperation, and now that she'd stopped, her body remembered every injury. "Drink," Akacheta said, leading her to the pool. "Slowly. Your stomach's not used to being full." Eva knelt and scooped water with shaking hands, sipping carefully despite wanting to gulp. It tasted of minerals and stone, metallic and strange, but it was cold and wet. Acha unsaddled his horse and rubbed it down, checking its legs with careful attention. The animal had run hard and carried double weight. It deserved care. "We have maybe 2 hours before they find this place," he said. "Klaus doesn't strike me as stupid." "He's not," Eva confirmed. "He's a businessman, cold, calculating. He'll spend whatever it takes to recover his investment. Then we need to be ready." Akacheta pulled his rifle from its scabbard, checking the action. "How many shots have you fired in your life?" "None," Eva admitted. "Then tonight's a bad night to learn, but we don't have the luxury of waiting." He handed her a pistol, a Navy Colt heavier than she expected. "This is single action. You pull the hammer back here until it clicks. Then you aim. Then you squeeze the trigger. Not pull squeeze." Eva held the weapon with both hands, feeling its weight, its deadly purpose. "I don't know if I can kill someone. You don't have to know yet. You just have to know that if Klaus catches us, he'll kill me and take you. And whatever he does after that will make being sold to a brothel look like mercy. So you point this gun at anyone who comes through that entrance, who isn't me, and you squeeze until the gun stops firing." He said it without judgment, just cold assessment. Eva appreciated that being treated like an adult who could make adult choices. She checked the pistol like he'd shown her, feeling the hammer click. "I want to live," she said. "Good." Akacheta took position near the entrance. "Now we wait. And while we wait, you tell me about this paper." So Eva told him. She told him about finding her father's body, about the funeral, about Lucinda's sudden marriage. She told him about the land transfer, about the forged signature, about the letter pressed in her father's Bible. "Sell Ice Creek or accidents happen." Brant, she told him about finding the ledger page, about seeing the pattern men who refused to sell men who died in accidents, land that transferred within days. Thomas Morrison, Robert Sullivan, Daniel Chen, others whose names she didn't recognize, and she told him about the notation beside her own name, Protocol 7, Alternative. Brenner contacted. When she finished, Akacheta was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was harder than she'd heard it. "I've seen this before," he said. "Not here, not exactly like this, but I've seen powerful men decide that some lives matter less than profit. I've seen systems built to erase inconvenient people. I've seen he stop jaw working. My people signed treaties. The United States government signed treaties, paper with signatures and witnesses and legal words that meant nothing the moment gold was found or land was wanted." He looked at her. "Your father was killed because he wouldn't sell land that powerful men wanted. That paper proves it. Klaus knows that. Quentin knows that. That's why they'll kill to get it back." "Then what do we do?" Eva asked. "We survive tonight. Then we find more evidence. The original ledgers. This page came from more witnesses, more proof. We make this so public that even powerful men can't make it disappear. And if we can't," Akacheta smiled, and it wasn't comforting, Then we make sure the truth survives, even if we don't. Before Ava could respond, the sound she'd been dreading, hoof beats, multiple horses moving slowly, searching. Torchlight flickered against canyon walls. Down, Akacheta hissed. Ava dropped flat behind a boulder pistol in her hands, heart hammering. Akacheta moved to the entrance rifle, ready, his body absolutely still. The hoof beats came closer. Stopped just outside the hollow, Klaus's voice cold and carrying. I know you can hear me, Scout. I know you're in there. The tracks lead here and don't lead out. Silence from the hollow. I'm a businessman, Klaus continued. I don't care about you. I care about profit and loss. Right now, that girl represents loss. I need to recover that loss. More silence. So here's my offer, Klaus said. Send the girl out right now, unharmed, and you ride away. I'll even pay you the $40 you spent. Or, his voice went harder, you keep her, and we come in there, and when we do, you'll die, and she'll wish she had. Akacheta's voice came back quiet but carrying. There's a third option, which is you ride away now. You forget this happened. You tell Quentin the girl escaped and probably died of thirst. You survived to do business another day. Klaus laughed. You think I'm afraid of you? One man with one rifle against 8 men. I think you're a businessman, Akacheta replied. And good business means calculating risk versus reward. How many men are you willing to lose because this hollow has one entrance, and I have a rifle, and the first 3 men through that gap die before they see me? Silence while Klaus considered. Then you're bluffing. One rifle doesn't kill 3 men that fast. One rifle doesn't. Akacheta agreed. But the girl has a pistol now. 6 shots. I taught her to squeeze, not pull. So really you're looking at 7 dead men if you rush, and only 8 of you total. Not good odds, not good business. Another long silence. Ava could almost hear Klaus calculating, weighing the value of one piece of paper against the cost of losing men. When Klaus spoke again, his voice was different, still cold, but with respect underneath. You're making an enemy tonight, Scout. I made an enemy the moment I stopped you from buying that girl, Akacha replied. This just confirms it. Now you need to decide living enemy who embarrassed you or die in this hollow, proving a point. The longest silence yet. Then hoof beats again, moving away, heading back toward Copper Gulch. But Eva noticed something. Only 6 horses leaving, not 8. He left 2 behind, she whispered. I know, Akacheta said. They'll watch through the night. Come morning, Klaus brings more men. We need to move before dawn. There's another way out. Narrow passage behind that juniper. Not wide enough for the horse, but wide enough for us. And the horse, I turn him loose. He'll find his way back or he won't. Either way, he's safer than we are. Ava wanted to argue that she couldn't possibly rest, but her body had other ideas. The crash after adrenaline, the exhaustion from months of abuse. She lay down on sandy ground and the pistol in her hand and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Akacheta was shaking her shoulder. The moon had set. Darkness was absolute except for starlight. Time to go, Akacheta whispered. Stay close, stay quiet. If shooting starts, you run and don't look back. Ava nodded. They slipped into the narrow passage behind the juniper, leaving the bay horse to fend for itself. They moved into darkness, and for the first time since her father died, Ava felt something unfamiliar stirring hope. Not much, not yet, but enough to keep moving forward, enough to refuse to die quietly. They traveled 3 days through country that looked dead, but wasn't just waiting, surviving the way everything in the desert survived, by being harder than the things trying to kill it. A caseta led them through canyons that twisted like snakes across dry riverbeds, where flash floods had carved channels 50 feet deep, over ridges where volcanic rock glittered black under the sun. They moved mostly at night when heat couldn't kill them. During the day, they sheltered under overhangs or in the shadow of boulders. Ava learned to move quietly to read sign, or the way Akacheta did a broken twig, hear disturbed sand there, the way birds went silent when predators approached. She also learned to shoot. On the second night, when they'd put enough distance between themselves and Copper Gulch, Akacha set up targets, pieces of dried wood balanced on rocks at increasing distances. "Stance first," he said, positioning her body. "Feet shoulder width, knees soft, not locked. Weight forward slightly." Ava tried to copy his stance, feeling awkward. The pistol was heavy in her hand. "Now breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. When your lungs are half empty, that's when you squeeze. Your heartbeat is calmest." Then she tried, missed by 3 ft. Again she tried again, missed by 2 feet again. By the 20th shot, her shoulder ached, her hands trembled, and her ears rang. But she hit the target, splintered the wood, sent it flying. "Good," Akacheta said, and the simple word felt like a gift again. "Until your hands remember, even when your mind forgets." They practiced until the pistol felt like an extension of her arm. Until the squeeze don't pull rhythm became automatic. Until she could hit a target the size of a man's chest from 20 yards more often than she missed. "Why are you doing this?" Ava asked during one of their dawn rests, sheltered in ruins of an old adobe structure. "Teaching me, protecting me. You could have left me in Copper Gulch." Akacheta was quiet for a long time, chewing on jerky gone hard as saddle leather. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly. "When I was 12 years old," he said, "white soldiers came to our village. They had paper, always paper with them, paper that supposedly said we had to move. My father tried to negotiate, tried to show them our treaty, our paper." He paused, staring at something Eva couldn't see. "The soldiers burned our paper, said it wasn't valid anymore. My father refused to leave. That night his voice went flat. The soldiers came back. They took my sister, 13 years old, said it was to educate her. We never saw her again." Ava's breath caught. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be angry, because sorry doesn't change anything. But angry makes you move, makes you fight, makes you refuse to accept that some people get to decide other people are disposable." He looked at her. "Then your father refused to sell land that powerful men wanted. They killed him for it. Then they tried to erase you. That's the same story, different details. And I'm tired." His voice cracked slightly. "So tired of watching that story repeat while good people look away." "But you're fighting now," Ava said. "We're fighting now," he corrected. "You ran instead of accepting being sold. You stole evidence instead of staying ignorant. You're still breathing when easier choices would have killed you. I'm just making sure you stay breathing long enough to make those choices matter." On the third day, they reached the Lakota camp, 40 lodges scattered along White River, where cottonwoods provided shade and water ran clear. The camp smelled of cooking fires, tanned hides, and horses. Children ran between lodges playing games. Women worked on buffalo hides. Men repaired weapons, tended horses. Akacheta's arrival caused a stir, not panic but heightened attention. People emerged from lodges, conversations pausing as they registered his presence, and the white girl riding behind him, exhausted and burned by sun. A man stepped forward taller than Akasheta, broader through the shoulders, with a face similar enough to be family. His expression was carefully neutral. "Akacheta," he said in English for Eva's benefit. "You bring trouble to us." "I bring justice to us, Halian," Akacheta replied. "This woman's father was murdered for his land. The men who killed him plan to kill her too. She has evidence paper that proves systematic murder. I'm asking for shelter while we plan how to use it." Halien's eyes flicked to Eva, assessing her, not calculating value like Klaus, but calculating risk. White men's justice is not our justice. White men's papers mean nothing when they decide papers are inconvenient. Why should we risk our people for white men's revenge? Because injustice to one is injustice to all, Akacheta said. Because the same men who killed her father are the same men who take our grazing land, who poison our water with mine runoff. Because, he paused, because looking away didn't save my sister. Looking away never saves anyone. It just makes us complicit. Helene's jaw tightened. He glanced around at the assembled people, at faces young and old, scarred by history, and wary of more pain. You ask much, cousin. I ask what's right. A long silence. Then an old woman stepped forward. Ancient her face, a map of wrinkles, her braided hair, white as winter, but her eyes sharp as obsidian. She looked at Ava with an intensity that felt like being flayed. This girl, the old woman said in Lakota, which Akacheta translated quietly. She has the eyes of someone who's seen death up close. Yes, Grandmother Winema, Ava said, responding even though she didn't speak the language. My father 8 months ago. Wine nodded slowly. And you carry his murder with you. Want revenge. I want justice, Eva corrected. I want the men who killed him to face consequences. I want other daughters not to lose their fathers the same way. Winna studied her for another long moment, then turned to Halian and spoke rapidly in Lakota. Akasheta translated, She says the girl speaks truth, says her anger is clean, anger justice, anger not poison anger, says we shelter her. Halian didn't look happy, but he nodded. She stays, but trouble follows her. Trouble finds all of us. She is, Acheta said with absolute certainty. They gave Ava a place in Winna's lodge. The old woman lived alone since her husband died years ago. The lodge was warm, smoky from the central fire, decorated with painted buffalo hides and bundles of herbs hanging from supports. Winna tended Eva's injuries with puces that smelled of sage and something bitter. The old woman worked in silence, her hands gentle but efficient. You're not afraid? Eva asked finally. Winna looked at her, one eyebrow raised. Of the trouble I bring, Eva clarified. Winna snorted a sound that might have been amusement. She said something in Lakota, gestured emphatically. Akacheta translated. She says trouble already lives here. Says white men bring it every season. More land claims, more miners poisoning water, more broken promises. Says you're just one more drop in a river already flowing. Might as well make the drop count for something. Over the following days, Ava recovered. She ate real food prepared by women who believed feeding people was care not charity. She slept actual sleep, deep and dreamless, without fear. She healed the burns, stopped seeping. The cuts closed. The constant ache of starvation faded. And she trained. Akachata taught her to shoot with more than pistols. Rifles too longer range, different stance. Taught her to reload quickly, to clear jams, to count shots. Taught her to move through terrain without leaving obvious tracks, to find water, to read weather. But more than skills, he taught her something else. Anger could be fuel if you didn't let it consume you. Justice could be purpose if you didn't let it become revenge. Survival could be victory if you lived long enough to witness evil face consequences. 2 weeks after they arrived, just as Ava was beginning to feel almost safe, Klaus found them. She was practicing rifle shots at targets Akasheta had set up 200 YD from camp distance enough to challenge her, but close enough that misses didn't endanger anyone. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with familiar force, the smell of powder smoke almost comforting. She just fired when she heard it. Hoofbeats, multiple horses coming fast from the south. Not the lazy pace of travelers, the deliberate speed of men with purpose. Aseta heard it too. His hands shot up in the signal for silence, for attention. Around the camp, people moved, not panicking, but preparing. Weapons appeared. Children were ushered toward lodges. Men took positions. 8 riders emerged from the tree-line. Klaus in front, his pale eyes scanning the camp. Behind him, hired guns Eva didn't recognize. And 2, she did the men who'd waited outside the hollow that first night. And behind them, staying carefully back but visible, Marshal Godfrey, his badge catching sunlight, his presence officially sanctioning whatever happened next. Klaus reined in 50 FT from the camp's perimeter, close enough to talk, far enough to retreat if shooting started. His eyes found Eva, immediately locked onto her. "Miss Brandt," he called, "you've led us on quite a chase. Cost me time, money, and reputation. I'm here to collect what you stole and return you to your legal guardian's custody." "I have no legal guardian," Eva called back, surprised by steadiness in her voice. "Lucinda Brandt forged documents after murdering my father for his land. The law you're representing is purchased law, Marshal. It's not justice. It's Quentin's payroll wearing a badge." Godfrey flinched slightly, the accusation landing because it was true. "I have here." Klaus held up a paper official, looking with seals, a warrant for your arrest on charges of theft, destruction of property, and assault. That's county law, federal law, real law. You come with us now peacefully, or we take you. And anyone who interferes faces charges. Hyan stepped forward, his rifle held casually but ready. "You have no authority here. This is Lakota land. Treaty land. Your county law stops at the river boundary." "Treaty land," Klaus repeated, and his smile was a blade. "Interesting, because I have here." He pulled out another paper, a copy of last year's territorial revision that moves the boundary 2 MEI west, which puts this camp inside county jurisdiction, which means Marshal Godfrey has authority to enforce that warrant. Eva's stomach dropped. She looked at Akacheta, saw the tension in his shoulders. "Show me that paper," Hyan demanded. Klaus walked his horse forward, holding out the document. Helene took it, read slowly, his jaw tightening. When he looked up, his expression was murder. "This is real," he said quietly to Aceta. "Federal sealed territorial governor's signature. They moved the boundary, and no one told us again." Eva saw it happening, saw Haley in calculating odds, saw him weighing one white girl's justice against the safety of his people, saw him reaching the conclusion any reasonable leader would reach. She wasn't worth a fight that would bring federal troops. She didn't blame him. "I'll go," Eva said, stepping forward. "I'll go with them." "This isn't your fight." "No," Akacheta said flatly. "Akacheta, no." He looked at Helene. "Cousin, I know what you're thinking. But if we hand her over, they kill her, and we become men who let evil proceed because fighting costs too much. We become survivors," Haley shot back. "We become people who live to fight another day." "It's not pride," the Cochetta said quietly. "It's the decision that defines who we are. My sister was taken because no one fought, and she's gone forever. I can't change that, but I can change this." He turned to Klaus. "You want her, come take her, but you'll wade through bodies to do it, and the first body will be mine." Klaus's expression didn't change, but Eva saw something flicker in his eyes. Calculation, risk, assessment. Before he could answer, one of his hired men, impatient or stupid or cruel, raised his rifle and sighted on Akacheta. Eva didn't think. Her body remembered the training. Her rifle came up smooth, found the target, fired. The bullet caught the hired man's rifle stock and splintered it, tearing the weapon from his hands and sending him tumbling backward off his horse with a scream. The camp exploded into motion. Lakota rifles appeared from everywhere, from behind lodges, from inside doorways, from positions Eva hadn't known were occupied. 20 weapons at least, all aimed at Klaus and his men. Next shot, Akacheta called voice, absolutely calm, doesn't miss. Next shot, kills. Your choice, Klaus. Do you want to do business, or do you want to die proving a point? Klaus sat perfectly still, his pale eyes moving across the camp, counting weapons, counting odds, calculating the only calculation that mattered. Could he win this fight? And what would it cost? Marshal Godfrey cleared his throat. This is federal. This is nothing, Helene interrupted. This is you leaving now, or explaining to federal authorities why you started a massacre on treaty land over a disputed boundary. Your choice, Marshal. For a long moment, the prairie held its breath. Then Klaus smiled cold and promising. This isn't over. Quentin knows about that ledger page now. He'll spend whatever it takes to get it back and silence anyone who's seen it. You just declared war on the richest, most powerful man in the territory. I realize you're still on my land, Pion said, and my patience just ran out. Leave now. Klaus turned his horse, his men following. Godfrey lingered, his expression troubled, then followed. But Ava noticed they didn't head south back to Copper Gulch. They headed west toward the territorial road, toward wherever men went to send telegrams and hire more guns. They'll be back, Helene said quietly. With more men, maybe with federal troops. We can't stay here. I know, Akacheta said, but we bought time. Time to get more evidence, more proof. Time to make this so public that Quentin can't make it disappear quietly. He turned to Eva. You did good. That shot was brave and stupid, and probably saved lives. Don't do it again unless you have to. Eva's hands were shaking now, adrenaline crashing. She'd shot at a man, missed deliberately, but aimed at human flesh, squeezed a trigger with intent to harm. The girl who'd been sold 2 weeks ago wouldn't have been capable of that. But Akacheta's hand on her shoulder was steady, and his voice when he spoke was certain. You're becoming someone who fights back. Don't apologize for that. The world has enough people who look away. That night, while the camp debated their next move, Eva sat with Akacheta by the river under stars. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not of Klaus or Quentin or dying. I'm afraid of becoming something I don't recognize. Someone hard. You're afraid of becoming me, Ida said, no judgment in it. No. Yes, maybe. Ava threw a pebble into the water. You're not hard. You're something else. Something I don't have a word for. I'm someone who's seen what happens when good people do nothing, Akacheta said quietly. And I decided I'd rather be dangerous to evil men than safe and useless. Rather be hard and alive than soft and dead. Does it ever get easier? Ava asked. No, he said simply. You just get better at carrying it. Better at living with the weight. A pause. Then Eva said something she hadn't planned. When Klaus took out that rifle, when that man aimed at you, I didn't think about justice or evidence. I just thought, I can't watch another good person die while I do nothing. So I didn't. Akacha looked at her, and something in his expression shifted respect or recognition. That's when you know, when protecting someone matters more than protecting yourself. That's when you've crossed from being a victim to being a person who chooses. They sat in comfortable silence while the river talked to itself and stars wheeled overhead. And Eva felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but acceptance. Acceptance that she'd crossed a line today, that the girl who knelt in Copper Gulch's street was dead and someone harder lived in her skin now. Someone who could aim true. Someone who would fight back. 3 days after Klaus's retreat, Dr. Jeremiah Bertram rode into the Lakota camp on a mule that looked older than he was, carrying saddlebags that clink-ticked with glass bottles and smelled of carbolic. Eva saw him coming and felt her heart stop. If Jeremiah was here, It meant something had changed, something big enough to risk the journey. He dismounted stiffly, his face gray with exhaustion and fear. Halayan approached with rifles raised, but Akacheta waved them down. "This is the doctor who helped us. If he's here, it's because he has reason." Jeremiah looked at Ava, and his expression crumpled with relief. "You're alive. Thank God. After you ran, I wasn't sure. Klaus came back 3 times, tore my clinic apart, threatened me. But I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't watch what's happening and pretend I don't know." He pulled a bundle from his saddlebag's oilcloth, wrapped around something heavy, unwrapped it with shaking hands. Ledgers, 4 of them, leather-bound, crammed with pages, and a diary smaller personal with a monogram CQ, Cornelius Quentin. "After you left, I started asking questions," Jeremiah said, voice gaining strength. Carefully, quietly, asking miners what they knew, checking old death certificates, matching dates. And I broke into Quentin's office, snuck in one night, picked the lock on his safe like I was a common thief. He spread the ledgers on the ground, hands trembling. "This is Systematic Protocol 7. It's not just your father, Ava. It's dozens, maybe hundreds over the years. Homesteaders who refused to sell, businessmen who competed too successfully, even politicians who voted against Quentin's interests." He opened the first ledger, pointed to entries in Quentin's cramped handwriting. "Thomas Morrison, Blue Ridge, Protocol 7, initiated 11:02:51. Shaft support maintenance deferred per cost analysis completed 11:15-51. Accidental death ruled. Mining rights transferred 11:18-51. Total cost $200 payment to TE Weight Inspector Robert Sullivan. Dry Canyon Protocol 7 initiated 8:14:51. Well poisoning via arsenic. Introduction trace amounts untraceable. Completed 8-20:51. Natural causes ruled. Grazing rights transferred 8-2:51. Total cost $150 payment to T. Wade, Johann Brandt. Ice Creek Protocol 7 initiated 2-28:52. Shaft support maintenance deferred, blast pattern modified to direct collapse completed 3:12:52. Accidental death ruled. Water rights transferred 315-52 via marriage proxy LBR. Total cost $300. Payment to TEA's vision blurred. She'd known it, suspected. But seeing it laid out like accounting, like her father's murder, was just another business expense. "There's more," Jeremiah said gently. "The diary is worse. He didn't just order it, he planned it. Detailed notes about timing, about methods, about which officials to bribe." He opened the diary to a page marked with cloth. February 15th, 1852. Brandt still refuses to sell Ice Creek despite increasingly generous offers. Stubborn German pride wife recently deceased, vulnerability there. Research local widow's preference for someone greedy, controllable. Alternative direct Protocol 7, but water rights complicated by heir daughter unmarried age 18. Need clean transfer mechanism. Marriage proxy through widow, or removal of heir via secondary protocol. 7 alternative consult. Brenner retrafficking feasibility. February 28th, 1852. Lucinda Hartwell identified as ideal proxy. Greedy, desperate, willing to bend rules. Courting initiated via T. Wade. Brandt's shaft inspection scheduled March 10th. Wade confirms support beams can be overlooked for $50 supplement. Timing critical, must complete before spring. Melt raises water table. March 12th, 1852. Protocol 7 completed successfully. Brandt crushed and collapsed, death immediate. Wade confirmed no witnesses. Lucinda cooperative as predicted. Marriage license filed same day, predated to March 1st. Daughter confined. Pending secondary protocol decision. July 15th, 1852. Daughter proving difficult. Attempted escape twice, asking dangerous questions. Lucinda recommends Brenner's solution, cleaner than direct removal. Profitable recovery possible. Eva's hands shook so violently she couldn't hold the diary. It fell from her fingers. Akacheta picked it up, read silently, his expression going harder with each line. When he looked up, his eyes were black with fury. He wrote it down. He documented every murder like he was proud of it because he thought he was untouchable, Jeremiah said bitterly. Rich enough, powerful enough, connected enough that even if someone found this, they couldn't touch him. Hyan leaned over the ledgers, reading slowly. How many? He asked quietly. Jeremiah had clearly already counted. 43 confirmed Protocol 7 cases in these ledgers, ranging from 1847 to last month. 43 people murdered for property profit or political convenience. 43. Ava's father was one of 43. One murder in a system of murder. One death in a factory of death. The rage that rose in her chest was so intense, it felt like drowning. Like being crushed under rocks. Like suffocating on the same greed that had erased 43 lives. We have to stop him, she whispered, and her voice sounded wrong, too flat, too empty, like all emotion had been burned out and only purpose remained. We will, Akacheta said with absolute certainty. This, he gestured at the ledgers, is proof even corrupt officials can't ignore. We take this to the territorial judge, to federal marshals, to newspapers. We make it so public that Quentin can't make it disappear. There's a problem, Jeremiah said quietly. These are copies I made. Good copies. I traced every entry, every signature, but copies nonetheless. The originals are still in Quentin's safe, and a good lawyer will argue copies can be forged, that these aren't admissible without originals to verify against. Then we get the originals, Eva said simply. That's suicide, Haley objected. Quentin knows someone broke into his safe. He'll have guards, traps, every precaution. Probably Eva agreed. But we don't have a choice. Without originals, this is just paper. With originals, it's proof. Undeniable, legally sound proof. She looked at Akacheta. You said, I'm becoming someone who fights back. This is me fighting. My father died so Quentin could steal water. 42 other people died for the same greed. If I don't fight now, if I don't risk everything, then their deaths meant nothing. Akacheta studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. We'll need a plan, a good one. Quentin's mine office is fortified, guarded. We have 6 weeks, Jeremiah said. Circuit Judge Thaddeus Carver arrives in 6 weeks. He's honest. One of the few judges Quentin can't buy. If we can get the originals to him with witnesses and testimony, he'll hear the case. He'll issue warrants. 6 weeks, Hien repeated. That's not much time. It's what we have, Akacheta said. So we use it. We plan. We prepare. And when we move perfectly because we'll only get one chance. And we change everything finished. We make 43 murders matter. We make my father's death mean something. We make Quentin face consequences for the first time in his miserable life. She looked at the ledgers at her father's name written next to completed and $300 payment. Looked at the diary entry that documented his murder like a business transaction. And she made a promise to her father's memory, to the 42 others, to herself. This would end. Quentin would fall, and she would be the one who pushed him, no matter what it cost. They left the Lakota camp 4 nights later, under a moon so thin it barely cast shadows. Akacheta, Eva Halion, and Mary Callahan, the schoolteacher who'd ridden out from Copper Gulch with information that changed everything. Quentin's hired 20 more men. Mary had reported professional gunmen. They're guarding the mine office in shifts, 8 men at a time, and he's moved the safe. It's no longer in the North Shaft office. It's in his private office inside the mine itself, 200 FT underground, surrounded by guards, and only one way in. That's insane, Hien had said. We can't fight through 20 hired guns. But Akacheta had smiled dangerously. We don't fight them. We make them fight each other. We make Quentin so paranoid, so scattered that when we move, he's looking the wrong direction. The plan was complex, risky, and depended on timing so precise that one mistake would kill them all. They traveled in two groups, Jeremiah returning openly to Copper Gulch, playing the exhausted doctor who'd searched for fugitives and found nothing. His presence would cover his knowledge critical. Akacheta, Evahalon, and Mary took the hidden routes, canyons, and dry washes only someone born to this country could navigate. They moved at night, slept in the day, left no trail. On the third night approaching Copper Gulch through a narrow canyon Akacheta had used before everything went wrong. Hawley, scouting ahead, stopped suddenly. His hand came up, danger signal behind him. The others froze. Rockfall, Hawley whispered, examining the stones blocking their path. His fingers found Trararch's smelled sulfur. Fresh blasting powder. This is the word trap never left his mouth. Rifles erupted from the canyon rim above 5, 6, maybe more muzzle flashes blooming in darkness. The sound was apocalyptic reports echoing and multiplying off stone walls until it felt like the world was tearing apart. Bullets screamed off rock wind as they ricocheted, punched into earth with wet thuds. One round passed so close to Eva's face, she felt the wind hot and violent and smelled scorched metal. The horses went insane. Mary's mare reared, nearly throwing her. Hawley and Geeling bolted toward the rockfall. Hyan threw himself sideways, slamming shoulder first into the canyon wall hard enough that Eva heard bone hit stone. Akacheta grabbed Eva and dragged her behind a boulder, using his body to shield her as another volley hammered their position. Rock chips exploded, stinging exposed skin, drawing blood. "How many?" Akacheta shouted over gunfire. Eva risked a look. 5 on the left, 2 on the right, maybe more farther back. Klaus can't see. Wait. Yes, that hat left side. Akacheta handed her his rifle. "Keep them busy. Make them duck. Don't worry about hitting them. Just make them think twice." Eva braced the rifle. Found a target. A silhouette against slightly less dark sky. Controlled her breathing. Squeezed. The recoil slammed into her injured shoulder. Pain exploded. White hot. So intense her vision grayed. She bit back a scream and dropped behind cover, gasping. But above, someone cursed viciously. Jesus Christ, and a hat went flying, tumbling down the canyon wall. Akacheta used the distraction to lean out and fire twice fast and controlled. The first shot sparked off stone. The second found flesh. Eva heard the impact, wet and heavy, heard a man's voice climb to screaming, heard his rifle falling. But then came the sound that stopped her heart. Helene's grunt, soft, surprised, confused. The sound of someone who doesn't understand what just happened. Eva twisted to look and saw him stagger, one hand going to his chest. Blood welled between his fingers, dark and pulsing, too much blood coming too fast. A second shooter, positioned high where they hadn't seen him, had found an angle through a crack. Haleon had been silhouetted for just a heartbeat, and it had been enough. His knees buckled. He hit the ground hard, his back sliding down the wall, leaving a dark smear. "No," Akacheta breathed, and the world seemed to stop. He crawled to Hawley, dragging him deeper into cover, heedless of bullets still cracking overhead. Mary scrambled after them, her medical training overriding terror. "Pressure," Mary said. Her hands already moving, already pressing against the wound. But blood pulsed between her fingers with each heartbeat. Hot and slick and unstoppable. I need cloth bandages." But they all knew. Eva saw it in Mary's face as professional assessment warred with desperate hope. Saw it in Akacheta's expression as he grabbed his cousin's hand. Saw it in Haleon's eyes already glazing, already going somewhere else. Haleon tried to speak. His lips moved, forming words in Lakota, but only blood came out thick and dark, bubbling with each attempted breath. Pink foam formed at the corners of his mouth. "Stay," Akaseta said, his voice breaking. "Brother, stay with me. We finish this together. Weep." But Helen's eyes were already gone, the light fading like a candle in wind. His hand tightened around Akacheta's wrist one final time. Desperate communication of something words couldn't reach, and then went slack. The breath rattled out of him long and wet and horrible. Then silence. The kind of silence that weighs more than sound, that crushes like stones, that announces the exact moment a person stops existing. Ava stared at Holly's body and felt something crack inside her chest. Understanding that this was her fault, that he died because she'd stolen a paper, because she couldn't accept being erased. "He died because of me," she whispered. No, Akacheta's voice was stone. Was iron, was something hard enough to cut. He died because evil men killed to protect themselves. Because Quentin ordered this ambush, because Klaus set this trap. You give blame where it belongs to them, not yourself, not him, to the ones who pulled triggers and paid for bullets. He closed Halayan's eyes with gentle fingers, then looked at Eva. She saw something in his face that terrified her. Not grief, though grief was there. Not rage, though rage burned underneath. Something colder, more dangerous. The look of a man who just paid a price he couldn't afford and would make someone else pay it back with interest. "Can you still ride?" he asked, his voice empty of everything except purpose. Ava nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then we ride. We don't stop. We don't mourn. Not yet. Not until Quentin pays for every drop of blood he spilled. Hallian's blood. Your father's blood. 43 names in that ledger, every single one. They left Hallian's body there. No time for ceremony. No time for grief. No time for anything except survival and the cold mathematics of revenge disguised as justice." Above, the shooting had stopped. Klaus's voice echoed down, satisfied. "One dead, at least pull back. Let them run. They know we're here now." They found a narrow fissure behind a scraggly juniper, barely wide enough to squeeze through, leading to a side canyon. But staying meant dying, so they went. The fissure scraped skin, tore clothing, forced them sideways with stone pressing from both sides. Ava bit her lip bloody to keep from crying out as rough rock ground against her shoulder. Behind her, Mary whimpered, but kept moving. They emerged into a small canyon, squeezed out, found themselves face to face with 3 more OFL's men. Guns already drawn, already aimed. "Well," one of them said, grinning. "Look what crawled out." Ava's hand moved without thought muscle memory, from training from Akacheta's voice, saying, "Squeeze." Don't pull from understanding she was about to die, and might as well die fighting. Her pistol came up smooth, found the center man's chest, fired. The range was 10 FT, even half-trained, even shaking, even Eva couldn't miss at 10 FT. The man went down hard, blood blooming across his shirt, his expression shifting from smug to shocked in the heartbeat between bullet and impact. The other 2 dove for cover, their shots going wild as Acheta's rifle cracked twice, one too methodical, and both men folded, screaming or silent. "Run," Akacheta said flatly. They ran through the side canyon, across a dry wash, over a ridge where ancient petroglyphs watched their passage with stone eyes. Behind them, shouts and hoofbeat tats, and the knowledge that Klaus wouldn't stop now, couldn't stop, because they'd killed 3 of his men. They reached the hills above Copper Gulch, just as false dawn lightened the eastern sky. Below, the town sprawled like a wound, smoke rising from smelters, the rhythmic thump of stamp mills already starting. And there the mine entrance dark mouth leading into the mountain, leading to Quentin's office, leading to the safe that held evidence worth dying for. Worth killing for, worth 43 lives, and Helene's blood, and whatever came next. "We can't do this," Mary said, voice shaking. "Not anymore. Halian's dead, and if we go in there, we'll die too. For what? For paper. For justice. That stops more people from dying," Akacheta said quietly. "For making Quentin face consequences before he kills 44 and 45 and however many more. For making Halen's choice mean something." He looked at Ava. "Your choice. We can turn back now. Take the copies. Give them to the judge. Hope they're enough. It's safer, Seer." But Eva asked, "But probably isn't certainly. Copies can be dismissed as forgeries. The originals can't. The originals hang him." Eva thought about her father, about the diary entry that documented his murder like a business expense. Thought about Holly's blood still wet on her hands. Thought about 43 names. "We get the originals," she said, "whatever it costs." Akakata nodded once. "Then we need a distraction, something big enough to pull guards away." Mary's voice was quiet but steady. "I can do that. I can start a fire in the equipment shed. Make it look accidental. They'll pull men from everywhere to fight it before it spreads to powder magazines." "That's suicide," Ava protested. "So is what you're planning," Mary shot back. "At least this way someone lives to tell the story if you die." She looked at Akacheta. "I'm tired of being safe while good people die. Let me do something that matters." Akacha studied her, then nodded. 1 hour after full dawn. That's when shifts change, when guards are least alert. You light the fire, then we move the moment we hear the alarm. 1 hour, Mary agreed. They settled in to wait as the sun rose and painted the sky orange and purple and red colors that looked like blood in water, like the future written in light. An hour felt like forever, and no time at all. The equipment shed went up like the wrath of God, flames roaring 50 ft high, black smoke boiling into the morning sky, heat so intense that men 200 wide away felt their faces burn. The shed had been full of oil, grease, lumber, and everything else flammable. Mary had chosen well. Alarm bells clanged, men poured from buildings, from the mine entrance, from guard posts, bucket brigades formed. Chaos spread like the fire itself shouted orders, conflicting instructions, universal panic. Akasheda and I moved through the confusion like ghosts. They wore miners' clothing, stolen from a wash-line canvas pants, rough shirts, faces deliberately smudged with coal dust. Just 2 more workers rushing to help. The mine entrance was barely guarded. Most of Quentin's hired guns had run toward the fire, basic human instinct overriding orders. The 2 men remaining at the gate barely glanced at Akasheda and Eva as they stumbled toward the entrance, coughing dramatically, shouting about smoke and needing to check equipment. Inside the mine was a different world, cool and dark, and smelling of damp earth, old explosives, and accumulated sweat. Timber supports groaned under the mountain's weight. Water dripped somewhere echoing. The main shaft descended at a steep angle, lit by oil lamps every 50 fi. They moved quickly but quietly, following Jeremiah's route main shaft, 200 ft down, and then left at the crosscut, then right at the OR cart rails, then left again into the administrative section, where Quentin's private office had been carved from living rock. The office door was heavy timber, banded with iron, locked with a padlock that gleamed even in dim lamplight. Akacheta pulled a pry bar from his belt. He'd carried it specifically for this, wrapped in cloth to muffle sound, and wedged it under the lock. "This will make noise," he whispered, "when it does be ready to move fast." Ava nodded, her pistol in hand, her heart hammering so hard she thought Akacheta must be able to hear it. He braced himself and pulled. The pry bar groaned against metal. The lock resisted, then resisted more, then crack. The sound was like a gunshot echoing down tunnels, announcing their presence to anyone with ears. The door swung open. Quentin's office was surprisingly civilized desk chairs, shelves lined with ledgers and maps, even a small rug. And there in the corner, the safe, iron-banded fireproof secured with a combination lock. Damn, Ada breathed. Can you open it? Ava asked. No, I don't know the combination. You need to step away from that safe, Cornelius Quentin's voice said from the doorway. Before I have my men shoot you where you stand. Ava spun pistol coming up and found herself face to face with Copper Gulch's master. Cornelius Quentin was a neat man, even now vest buttoned despite the emergency hair-painted mustache waxed to points, but his eyes burned with fury, barely contained with rage at someone threatening his empire. Behind him, Klaus Brenner rifle aimed at Agachetta's chest and 4 hired guns, all armed, all positioned to turn the office into a killing box. Marshal Godfrey stood behind them, his expression trapped between duty and doubt, his hand hovering near his pistol, but not drawing. You just can't stay dead, can you, girl? Quentin said, voice tight with controlled fury like a cockroach. Sun on you in Copper Gulch, and you turn up in the Lakota camps. Ambush you in the Badlands, and you crawl into my mine. Persistently stupid. His gaze flicked to Asheta. And you more trouble than any Indian should be allowed to cause. Should have killed you years ago when you started asking questions. Open the safe. Ava said, her voice steadier than she felt. Open it, or we start shooting. Quentin laughed, genuinely amused. You're outgunned 5-2. You're underground with 1 exit, and you're threatening me. He shook his head. Girl, I admire the audacity, but stupidity stops being brave when it becomes suicide. He gestured to Klaus. Shoot them both. Empty the rifles. Toss the bodies in shaft 7 where we put the others. We'll tell the judge they started a fire and died in the collapse. Simple, clean. Klaus raised his rifle sighting carefully on Ava's chest. The other men followed suit rifles coming up, hammers cocking. Before they could fire, the mountain itself answered. A support beam rotted from years of damp, weakened by decades of constant blasting, undermined by Quentin's systematic cost-cutting. Chose that exact moment to give up. It cracked with a sound like artillery, impossibly loud. The beam split lengthwise with a tearing shriek, then came down. The beam smashed through a shelf, scattering ledgers, taking down one of the oil lamps. Glass shattered. Lamp oil spilled across dry wood in a spreading pool that caught light with a soft womb that sucked oxygen from the room. Flames spread impossibly fast, racing along ceiling timbers, feeding on decades of dust and spilled gun oil and resin from cheap wood. Smoke filled the tunnel instantly, thick and black and choking. Klaus fired blindly through smoke, panicking. His shot ricocheted and caught one of his own men in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man screamed and crashed into Klaus, knocking him sideways into the flames. Klaus's coat caught fire. He began to scream high, terrible, inhuman, and ran blindly toward the tunnel entrance, still burning, still screaming. The powder, someone shouted. The crates, get out. Because stored in Quentin's office, stacked with criminal carelessness in the corner, were 3 crates of blasting powder. And the flames were spreading toward them with hungry inevitability. Chaos erupted. Men scrambled for the exit, shoving each other, no longer soldiers, but terrified animals facing fire underground. At the oldest nightmare of everyone who worked mines, another beam cracked overhead, then another. The ceiling sagged, visibly raining dirt and stones that grew larger with each handful. Akasheta grabbed Eva's arm. Out now. But Quentin was already at the safe, spinning the combination with shaking hands, driven by the same greed that had killed 43 people. Even with fire spreading, even with the ceiling collapsing, he needed his evidence. The safe popped open. Quentin reached inside, grabbed the ledgers. the originals that matched the copies Jeremiah had made, the proof that couldn't be dismissed. Ava saw her chance. She lunged forward, grabbed two of the ledgers from Quentin's hands, tore them free with desperate strength. He grabbed back fury, replacing fear, refusing to let go even as flames licked closer. "Those are mine," he screamed, no longer civilized, but something primal. "Mine you can't." A gunshot cracked. Quentin jerked his eyes, going wide with shock. He looked down at his shoulder where blood bloomed. Looked up at Marshal Godfrey standing in the doorway, pistol smoking. "I said move!" Godfrey shouted. "All of you before were buried alive." He'd shot Quentin. Not to kill the wound was shoulder deliberate, meant to stop not murder, but shot him nonetheless. Shot the man who'd paid his salary for years. Quentin staggered backward, clutching his shoulder face, a mask of betrayal. You shot me. You dare." "I dare," Godfrey said flatly. "I'm done, Quentin. Done following your orders. Done being your dog. That girl's right. You murdered her father, murdered dozens. And I helped by looking away. But I'm not helping anymore. Now get out before the powder goes." Ava didn't need to be told twice. She clutched the ledgers against her chest and ran Akasheta right behind her. They burst from Quentin's office into the main tunnel, as behind them the ceiling gave way, completely tons of rock and timber crashing down with a roar like the end of the world. They ran through smoke and falling debris, through tunnels that shook and buckled through air that burned to breathe. Behind them beams snapped like rifle fire, each crack followed by more collapse. They hit the main shaft as the blasting powder ignited. The explosion was muffled by tons of rock, but still powerful enough to lift them off their feet, to throw them forward in a wave of heat and pressure that felt like being hit by an invisible fist. Eva's ears rang deaf, came back slowly to hear screaming and rumbling and the sound of the mountain settling. They emerged into daylight, into open air, into chaos. The mine entrance vomited smoke and dust, a black column rising hundreds of feet. Men staggered out coughing and burned faces black with soot. Some walked, some were carried, some didn't come out at all. Cornelius Quentin emerged last, clutching his wounded shoulder, supported by two guards. Despite everything, despite the fire, the collapse being shot, fury still radiated from him. A crowd had gathered, miners pulled from the firefight families who'd heard the explosion, shopkeepers and prostitutes and everyone who called Copper Gulch home. Everyone who'd heard Jeremiah's whispers, seen the copied ledgers, lost someone to Quentin's accidents. Quentin saw them, and his expression twisted beyond reason. He'd lost control, lost his evidence, lost his mind, lost his mystique of untouchable power. The Indians started it. He shouted, pointing at Akacheta. He broke into my office, set fire deliberately. Tried to kill us all. "Marshal, arrest them. I want them hanged." "I want shut your mouth," Godfrey said quietly. The words were so unexpected that Quentin actually stopped, mouth hanging open. "I'm done," Godfrey continued. "Done with you. Done with corruption. Done pretending your orders are law." But Quentin was already moving his hand, diving into his vest pocket where he kept a Derringer pearl-handled insurance, a final solution. His eyes locked on Eva with murder absolute. If she died now, the ledgers were just paper. If she died now, he might still survive. He had the Derringer halfway drawn when Godfrey fired. The bullet struck the tiny pistol, tore it from Quentin's hand in a spray of sparks and pearl fragments. But Quentin lunged anyway, reaching for Ava with his good hand, fingers grasping for her throat. Godfrey fired again. This shot took Quentin in the other shoulder, spun him around, dropped him to his knees in the mud. He knelt there, both shoulders bleeding, face gray with shock and pain, and the dawning realization that he'd lost everything. I said, Shut your mouth. Godfrey repeated, pistol still trained on Quentin. And stay down, or the next shot goes somewhere fatal. Ava stepped up onto an overturned crate, raising herself above the crowd. She looked like something from a nightmare face, black with soot hair-singed dress, torn, but holding the blood-bought ledgers high where everyone could see. "You want truth?" she shouted, voice cracking, but carrying. "Here's his handwriting, his signature's proof." She held up the first ledger opened to a random page. Thomas Morrison shaft support, maintenance deferred. Per cost analysis died when the shaft collapsed. Robert Sullivan, well poisoning via arsenic, died 3 days after Quentin's last offer. Jan Brandt, my father blast pattern modified to direct collapse, murdered so Quentin could steal our water. Her voice rose, powered by months of rage. Finally given permission. Protocol 7, that's what he called it. His system for murdering people who wouldn't sell 43 names in these books. 43 people killed for land and water and profit. And I was supposed to be 44. She threw the open ledger to the nearest miner. "Read it. See for yourselves." The ledger passed from hand to hand, each person reading a page, recognizing a name, seeing the pattern. More ledgers appeared. Pages rustled. Voices rose first, murmuring, then shouting. "My brother's name is here. Someone called. Says Protocol 7 completed. Says he was murdered. Mine too." Another voice said it was an accident. "He killed my husband and told me I should be grateful for the death benefit." A woman's voice raw with pain. $10. $10 for my husband's life." The murmur became a roar, grief and rage mixing, building like a storm. 43 families worth of suppressed fury finally given voice. Godfrey holstered his pistol and pulled his badge from his vest. He looked at it for a long moment, at all the compromises it represented. All the times he'd looked away. Then he dropped it in the mud at Quentin's feet. "I've been looking the other way too long," he said, voice rough with shame. "Told myself it was keeping order, keeping peace. But there's no peace in this. Just murder dressed up in paperwork." He looked at the crowd, at the miners with their pick handles and justified rage. "Cornelius Quentin, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, conspiracy to commit murder, and there's a lot more in there, isn't there?" He looked pointedly at the miners. "Anyone touches that Lakota or the girl, they answer to me. Not to Quentin's law anymore, to real law, the kind that doesn't look away when powerful men commit murder. The rope someone had brought, actually brought, prepared for a lynching, hung limp and forgotten." The crowd stepped back, shame and relief mixing on their faces. Cornelius Quentin knelt in the mud rain, beginning to fall from the smoke-dark sky, washing soot from his face. But not guilt, not blood, not the weight of 43 murders finally come due. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. For the first time in his life, Cornelius Quentin had nothing to say, no bribe to offer, no threat to make no lie smooth enough to escape justice. Ava stood on her crate, shaking with exhaustion and blood loss. She'd been hit by falling rock in the tunnel, was bleeding from a dozen places she hadn't noticed, and met Akachetta's eyes across the crowd. He nodded once. Acknowledgement, respect, shared victory bought at a price neither would ever forget. They'd done it, survived, won. But the cost, Halen's body still lying in that canyon, her father's grave. 43 names that would never breathe again. That cost would stay forever. The storm broke over Copper Gulch rain, falling in sheets, washing away blood and lies, and the illusion that power made you untouchable. And for the first time in years, the town smelled like something other than copper and death. It smelled like rain, like possibility, like justice. 6 weeks later, Circuit Judge Thaddeus Carver arrived with military escort, a man with steel-gray hair and a reputation for brutal honesty that made politicians nervous and criminals terrified. The trial lasted a week. Quentin's lawyer gave up on the third day after the 20th witness and 50th piece of documentation proved beyond doubt that Protocol 7 was real systematic and had killed at minimum 43 people. Ava testified standing before the judge in a plain dress Mary had sewn, showing the court her father's ledger page, the diary entries, the cold documentation of murder as business expense. Judge Carver studied the evidence for a long time, his expression darkening with each line. Then he pronounced sentence. Ava Brandt is confirmed as legal heir to the Ice Creek property. Cornelius Quentin is guilty of 15 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, multiple counts of fraud, theft, and kidnapping and unlawful sale of persons. 25 years at hard labor in territorial prison, no parole, assets seized for restitution to the families destroyed. Lucinda received 12 years for fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and abuse. Klaus, who'd survived his burns but barely disappeared before trial and was never seen in Colorado territory again. Part of Quentin's fortune, as ordered by Judge Carver, was paid to the Lakota band as restitution for Helene's death and years of encroachment. It was acknowledgement written into law that their loss mattered, that justice should be blind even when people weren't. Eva rebuilt her father's claim into something new, not just a homestead, but a way station where travelers could stop safely, where water was free and scales were honest, where no one was turned away for skin color or language spoken. Above the door, she carved "Water shared is water saved." All welcome. She hired survivors of Klaus's network, Celia, and others paying fair wages. Mary Callahan taught school in the barn loft twice weekly, teaching any child who came, regardless of origin. Akayeta became the bridge between two communities, learning not to hate each other. He rode escort, carried messages, helped settle disputes before they became blood feuds. Their relationship evolved slowly, naturally built on shared trauma and trust earned through crisis after crisis. By the time anyone asked if they were courting, they'd been partners for months in every way that mattered. The proposal came during the first snow, characteristically simple. "This place is ours now. Should make it official." "That your way of asking?" "Yes." Then yes, the wedding merged. Lakota and settler customs, when blessed with sage smoke. Mary read from the Bible. Both communities came weary, but gradually relaxing as food was shared and music played and children chased each other. It wasn't perfect integration. It wasn't the end of prejudice, but it was a beginning. 5 years later, on a bright morning in early summer, Ava and Akacheta stood at the way station's long table, surrounded by a gathering that would have been unthinkable when they first met. 15 children, some with Lakota braids and buckskin leggings, some with settler bonnets and calico dresses, some with features blending both worlds, waited with barely contained excitement. Small packs on their backs, eyes bright. Mary Callahan stood beside them now, not just a teacher, but the way station school mistress, her hair graying, but her voice still strong. Wine was there too, leaning on a carved walking stick, but smiling warmly. "Today," Ava said, addressing the children in the mixture of English and Lakota that had become common at the way station, "we go to honor someone who stood for justice, who stood for all of us, even though we come from different peoples." Added, "His name was Helayan. He was my brother. He gave his life so that right could triumph over wrong, so that you, all of you, could grow up in a place where justice is more than just a word spoken by powerful men." The group set out on foot, Eva and Akacheta, leading Mary and Wanyama, walking together behind them, the children following in a chattering mixed group that paid no attention to who was Lakota and who was settler. The climb to the ridge took 2 hours with frequent stops for water and rest for pointing out birds and plants. for telling stories about Halayan, how he could track a deer through solid rock, or so it seemed. How he laughed so loud it echoed off canyon walls. How he always shared his last piece of dried meat. When they reached the Chiron, Ava told the children, "This is where justice was earned, not given. Where someone chose to stand when he could have walked away. Where love, not romantic love, but love for what is right, became more important than life itself." Akacheta spoke in Lakota than in English. "We honor him not by being sad, but by being the people he died to protect, by building peace, by refusing to let fear or anger or old hatred decide who we become." Each child placed a stone on the cairn, a tradition that had developed over the years. Each stone representing a promise to remember, to honor, to carry forward the choice Helene had made. Then Mary taught them a song, words in both languages, melody simple enough for young voices. It spoke of sacrifice and hope of different peoples learning to walk together, of water shared and land honored and justice earned through courage. Their voices rose together, Lakota and English blending, carried on the wind across the prairie where Halayan had fallen, and where, because he fell, something new had been able to grow. When the song ended, Winey said in Lakota, which Eva translated, "The dead live on in the world. We build for the children. This is the greatest honor we can give them. Not tears, but the future they died to make possible." They descended as the sun began to set, children tired but content, some holding hands across the invisible lines that had once divided their peoples absolutely. Ava and Akacheta walked last, watching the mixed group ahead. Lakota and settler children helping each other over rough spots, sharing water, laughing together. "He would have liked this," Akacheta said quietly. "He made it possible," Ava replied. Back at the way station as families gathered their children and prepared to head home, some to the Lakota camp, some to settler homesteads, some to the growing mixed community developing around Ice Creek itself. Eva stood on the porch and watched the sunset over land that was finally truly becoming home. The creek still flowed past Ice Creek Way Station, carrying the past away, while nurturing the present, carving new channels through ancient stone. The Chiron on the ridge still stood weathered, but intact, reminding anyone who climbed that high that some people chose to stand when it would have been easier to walk away. And the road between two worlds, between Lakota and settler, between past and future, between two people who survived what should have destroyed them, stretched on, maintained and traveled proof that sometimes the hardest journeys lead somewhere worth reaching. Ava and Akacheta had built it together through daily work of choosing justice over convenience, mercy over profit, truth over comfortable lies. Not through dramatic gestures or spoken vows, but through accumulated small choices that defined character more surely than any grand declaration. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was possible. And possibility earned through blood and pain and the refusal to let evil win was more than enough.